Welcome to the Kindness Project, the podcast designed to share stories of kindness and share how kindness can make positive change in our world, one small act at a time. This time on the Kindness Project, Hereditary Baldness, Obsolete Technology, and we have part 2 of our interview with Kim Mer from Hope for Havering. I will let you start, my friend, as you've got a really amazing intro you've just come up with.
Like I always do. Welcome to the Kindness Project, guys. Woo.
Whoa! Whoa! Woohoo! No, before we start, give me your best woo. Now, give me your best sarcastic woo and then your best enthusiastic woo.
Woo. Woo.
Okay, here's my 2. I'm going to do enthusiastic first. Woo! Yeah!
I was half expecting you to go, get in there!
Oh yeah, get in. And then there's my sarcastic one. Whoa.
No, that's too fake.
Oh, right, okay. Anyway, welcome to the Kindness...
Supposed to have a bit of real.
Welcome to the Kindness Project, guys. Woo. And I am joined by a girl who is amazing in a lot of ways, and I'm not being sarcastic. She is loving her mocks, and I'm loving her mocks results. She's loving her mocks, but I'm not sure what she thinks about her locks, or jocks, or frocks. It's Charlotte Dames.
And I'm joined by a man whose hair seems to grow more on his arms than it does on his head nowadays.
Oh, low blow. That was...
No, it's about arm height, I think.
That was a low blow. The scary thing is you've inherited my astuteness, haven't you? So you're quite hairy.
It's not good.
It's not good. Yes, everywhere. Yeah, I am quite hairy apart from one expanding patch on my head.
I think it was my fault that it started in the first place.
Why do you think it's your fault? Well, because you slapped my head a lot when you was a kid. I think you might be right, actually. Are you to blame for my baldness?
So sorry.
Well, they say that actually it comes from the mum side of your family. So it's not from your dad's side. My dad's bald, but a lot of my uncles were bald. Apart from Robert, who he was like...
Did he have an afro too?
He didn't have an afro, but he had hair like yours. He had hair down to his shoulders.
I cut mine.
And yeah, it was quite a good set of locks. But yeah, I'm relaxed about my hair fading, and I just need to get to a point now where I go, right, it's all coming off, but I'm not there yet. The hole is not big enough. It's big enough to swallow a car, but it's not big enough for me to go full bald.
It's a low bar.
What do you mean it's a low bar?
Huh?
How dare you? Your mocks were good, weren't they?
You think so?
Yeah, I think so. Good set of results.
Yeah.
Apart from business studies.
We haven't learned half the content.
I was gonna let you inherit Savallo, my business.
And I turned that down several years ago.
How can you turn it down when you're 8 or 10? But now you've got rubbish mocks. I don't think you are not worthy of the crown anymore.
Oh yeah, 8 rubbish. Yeah. Yeah.
But no, but the rest were amazing, wasn't they? Mm-hmm. So well done. I want to have a little conversation about technology, but in fact, obsolete technology.
iPods.
Because
PS Vitas.
PS Vita. I had a PS Vita.
This is something
I had 2
actually
games
did learn
for
in
it.
Business.
What?
Obsolete products.
Don't buy a PS Vita. Well,
you can't buy PS Vitas anymore unless you're an eater.
Can I first ask the question of the podcast? What's your favourite piece of technology you'd never dream of using now? Or what's your favourite piece of technology that is now obsolete? And by the sounds of it, it's iPods to you, because you've still got an iPod, haven't you?
She's a beaut.
She's a beaut.
She's a beauty.
She's a beaut. You cannot download any new songs onto it. You cannot...
Beyonce in the script will forever fulfill my life.
That's the problem. I mean, like now with Spotify, you've got unlimited access to every single song, but like I mean, when I was a kid, when I was probably your age, I had a Walkman. And I had to just, if I wanted new music, I had to go out and buy a new tape. And we had a little shop called Mastertronic across the road from my house. Guess how much a new album was?
5p.
$4.99. 5p? Sorry, do you think I was born in the 1700s or something? 5p?
You'd be lucky if something was as cheap as 1p back then.
Well, you could buy a penny sweet, and in actual fact, half pennies existed, so I could buy a half penny sweet. How about that?
Now it's all 10p and 20p and oh look 50p.
That's inflation for you. I mean, inflation is an amazing thing. Did I ever tell you about what happened in Zimbabwe a few years ago?
No.
Inflation ran rampant because they changed the government. So a loaf of bread cost like 10 million of their currency.
Like Germany after World War One.
Exactly. Yeah. This is not the most entertaining podcast we've done.
I love the story of Germany after World War One because there were people and they were like, they used to say that people would carry their money in baskets and put the baskets down because they were heavy, and people would steal the baskets and leave the money behind because that's how little the money was worth.
Really? I didn't know that.
And they used to burn it for fire because it was so much cheaper than buying wood.
Yeah. So that's what happens in economies that are failing because the currency gets devalued. Anyway, welcome to the Economics Podcast 101. This lesson brought to you by mass inflation. Mass inflation. Burn your cash.
Actually, it's called hyperinflation.
Oh, all right. This lesson's brought to you by hyperinflation. Where's my petrol? I want to burn some money. I'm not going to use that. I'm not going to use that as a tagline for my financial planning business, though. That'd be good. Welcome to Savello Financial Planning. We look after your wealth. Now, where's my petrol? I'm burning money.
I do want it on a shirt now, though.
What? Where's my petrol? I'm burning money.
Or a cheesy rap line.
The problem is, right, you want everything on a shirt. You wanted a mug that at the bottom of the mug said, "'Tis the end." I mean, you've gone a bit merch mental, to be honest.
I thought that was a good idea.
It is a good idea. It's a good idea. A T-shirt that says, "Where's my petrol? I want to burn my money," is probably less of a good idea.
Leave out your baskets of cash, we'll take the baskets.
Welcome to Hyperinflation 101. Anyway, so I
We're talking about how to build with bricks of cash.
I didn't realise we were going to go on such a weird, economically related tangent.
I know loads about the hyperinflation in Germany because it was like, yeah, this might come up, and it never came up, and I was like...
Tell us a little bit more about the hyperinflation in Germany then.
Like I said, they used to give their children blocks of money instead of buying them toys because it was just cheaper for them to build stacks of money than to actually get them like building blocks. And they used to use it for fire, and like a loaf of bread was so many marks.
Yeah.
It wasn't worth it. But the only people it was really good for was the people in debt. Like, I feel bad for the old age pensioners whose money was just gone. They just completely replaced the currency and got all the money was obsolete. Obsolete. There we go. German money. Marks. Now it's the Deutschmark. I don't know if it's still the Deutschmark. Am I saying it wrong?
No.
Don't know if
You're not saying it very Germanically, if that's a word. Deutschmark! No, it's not the Deutschmark anymore, Charlotte, is it? Clearly. Because what is it now?
the euro?
Yeah. They're part of the... Welcome back to the Economics Project.
European economics.
We're on lesson... Welcome to the Open University. In lesson 2, we're going on to what currencies other countries use. And in Germany, Charlotte, it's the euro, so well done.
Yeah, but it used to be the Deutschmark.
It did used to be the Deutschmark. All right, let me give you another test, right? Before the euro, what did the Italians use?
Pasta.
No. That is vaguely racist, vaguely offensive. Of course they didn't use pasta. It was pizza. No, it was lira. They used lira.
I thought that was like...
What did the French use? And don't say snails, that'd be offensive.
Can you imagine
Don't say snails. One snail, two snail. Don't say baguettes. All right? Do not say baguette.
I'm thinking back to a time when people just used to use stones as currency.
Yeah. You know what, right? It's funny, because the French used to use a currency called the franc, right?
I'm not surprised. They had a king called Francis.
Yeah, they like the word they like stuff with fr in, don't they? Mm-hmm. But it did remind me, I had a really lovely lady, right, who called me today to say, I'd like to interview you for a project that I'm doing about business leaders in our particular part of East London / Essex. And I went, amazing, yeah, happy to get involved in that. Send me an email with all the details. And the lady's name is Olive, right? So she sent me an email with all the details. Guess what her surname is? Oliver.
I knew that because I heard you talking earlier.
Her name is Olive Oliver, which I think is an amazing name. I might call you Dames.
No.
And then I realised my dad's name is James Dames, which is quite onomatopoeic, isn't it?
You're just Christopher.
No, I'm Chris. I never use Christopher. Nobody calls me Christopher apart from my mum, who's now left us, and my dad. Apart from that, nobody else does.
I do, in my head.
Yeah, but it doesn't count if it's in your head. Anyway, on that particular note, welcome to the Kindness Project, the Economics Project, and the Obscure Currencies Project. Shall we get on with the show?
No.
Oh, why? Oh yeah. Where can people get in touch with us?
Should we get on with the show? No, mate.
No, we're going to carry on wittering. Go on.
We're very tired, and there's coffee. I like coffee. Coffee's good. Anywho, Twitter.
Yeah.
@OlotKindness. Boom. Facebook, The Kindness Project. There's a magical search bar. And there's also one of those in Google, and it's the same thing. So, ola@thekindnessproject.co.uk is the email, and you will find us on Google, so there's no need to give you the URL for the website.
Yeah, just Google The Kindness Project. We pop up. We're now up
We're
to...
infamous on Google.
Apparently we're now up to about 19,000 subscribers, so
Ooh.
There's now more people listening to The Kindness Project than ever before. Which
I was going to say there's more people listening to the Kindness Project than people who work on it, and I realise that's been the way for a long time.
Well, it's been a long time since we've had just 3 listeners, so yeah, that's true. Shall we crack on with the show?
Yeah.
This week, we have got an interview with...
Someone brilliant?
I don't know. No, we've got clearly somebody brilliant. I was just trying to work out who it was. We've got an interview with a lady called Kim Mer. She runs a charity called Hope for Havering that does amazing work in Havering with the homeless. In this part of the interview, we talk more about the charity, and I ask her some of our legendary
questions of the podcast. Woo.
Shall we have a listen?
Yeah, let's do it.
And as part of the service, is that what you focus on? You focus on getting them to a point where they effectively don't need you anymore and they can live independent lives.
Yeah, and now what's been difficult over the years is that many of the people go out of borough because of the lack of affordable rent in our own borough, and the need for a guarantor or a rent deposit, and so we have landlords that have properties in other areas that enable that to be possible. We were really fortunate in last year to receive a grant from the council, and we were able to take on 20 studio flats in our local area.
Okay.
And we already had 3 leased properties that we'd been running for at least 7 years in the area, but not enough for the numbers that we were seeing. And so now we can accommodate within Havering 27 people.
Okay.
The shelter, we take 20 people at a time, so 3 or 4 of them are ready to be housed, finding the place to be housed. you'll get the new arrivals tonight, and then the rest are on the journey of getting everything together to be housed. And we're working very effectively with the council. If they're in the shelter, they're not usually eligible for council housing, so they are totally reliant on our support to link them with landlords who are suitable for them. Yeah.
So Havering's not particularly, if you've considered it just in isolation, is not known for having a big homelessness issue. And when we met, I was actually quite surprised that the charity existed in Havering.
Yeah.
You don't perceive that Havering has a challenge with homelessness. Now that's completely on my ignorance, right?
Okay.
Help me understand what the challenge we face, because it sounds like there's certainly demand for the service, and it's increasing.
Well, if I give you a general stat for UK, there's in 2018 it was recorded that there were 320,000 homeless people, and that was a 40% rise on the previous year stats. So when we started in 2011, basically we opened our doors on the 1st of November and one person came, and in fact the guy who came offered to help us, and it was really, really lovely. But I said to him, just bring your mates. Okay. Tell them that we're okay. And at the time it was a pack and go shelter, which meant that every night we turned up at a new church, took things out of our minibus, obviously bedding and mattresses, and set up a shelter. Every night the same. And basically the people I knew who were homeless were too either embarrassed or had certain perceptions of what a shelter would be like. So he went and spread the message. By, I don't know, middle of December, we had 15 people in the shelter who were in need of help and who'd been either referred by the Salvation Army, by word of mouth, by the YMCA as people presented themselves, because it's a very obvious building, by libraries even. So we were getting the word out, and there were 15 people from Havering in the shelter. Now, when I spoke to the council a few months down the line, we put in a planning application and for 15 beds in the shelter, and then 15 kind of like hostel style units. So it would have housed 30 in all. And by the time I was discussing it with the council, which was the following year, we'd already had 115 referrals.
Right.
So they said to me, their stats showed there were only 6 street homeless people. Now,
that's clearly not true, isn't it?
I'm looking around me in a shelter where there's 15 people who are testifying that they've slept in parks, in cemeteries, in the hospital, behind the bins, in stairwells, on trains, on buses, huts, you name it, park benches.
I suppose part of the challenge is if you're not prepared to face the issue, right? If you're massaging the stats, I was going to say filling, but it's not. If you're massaging the stats, you're not facing the challenge you've got, and therefore you can't do anything about it, right? You know, you've got to be honest about what the challenge might be.
I think at the time it was a very political issue, and so the mantra was these are our figures, and it didn't matter what I said, who I presented, there was a reason why they weren't homeless. Right. And however, over the past 2 or 3 years, the council has changed its attitude.
Interesting.
Really, really strongly, and I would say, well, for a start, our numbers increased to 20, then to 25, and then up to December 2019, we could take 30 in our shelter. We were having to take 30. because of the numbers of referrals.
Is the ambition to increase capacity?
Not really to increase the capacity.
Okay.
It would be to increase the move on accommodation. And we've now got a permanent night shelter, and that happened in January 2019.
Where's the shelter?
It's at Atlanta Boulevard in Romford, opposite Lidl. So it's above some offices, and we got the planning because the council was in support of us.
Good.
And so we had 30 in our shelter, and it was recognised because there's rough sleeping strategy meetings and things, that there were 30 other people sleeping outside. So last summer it was recognised there were 60 people who were street homeless, so to speak, although 30 were being sheltered and 30 were in different accommodations, but different locations. We're very proud to have worked in conjunction with the council, because whilst they gave us a grant to increase our capacity to house people and support them, they also employed a worker who strategically keyworked some of the most hard to reach people, and I think achieved her goal of accommodating every single person that she could. Unfortunately, people are constantly becoming homeless.
Yeah. What I'm really curious about is the circumstances that bring somebody to that state of homelessness. Can we understand a bit more about that?
Yeah, well, we're looking at what are the drivers for that, and 80% would say it's a relationship breakup.
Okay.
And so people don't put in their diary, my relationship will break up on the 1st of September, I need to have savings for that.
Yeah, it doesn't happen, does it?
And what can happen is so many testimonies of people who've been working, having an ordinary life. Their relationship may have broken up a year before. They've gone into a deep, dark depression.
Yeah. Because of the emotional turmoil.
They've exhausted all their friends, and particularly the older someone gets, the less your mates want you to stay on their sofa.
Yeah.
So this might be a thing if you're single and your friends are single, but once people are in established married, age groups,
More difficult, isn't it?
yeah, they don't want someone of 40 sleeping on their sofa.
Gotcha.
And basically, some of them lose their jobs, lose their businesses, their behaviour becomes more erratic. Yeah. And this is a really strong story that comes through. So 80% relationship breakup. Now, for me, that's where we need to start. And one of the things that we have developed in the charity is a code of how to communicate. I'm a communication therapist by trade or by profession. For all my life I've been working helping children communicate, helping young adults, people with learning difficulties or autism, and because it's a communication breakdown, if we can help people communicate well with each other, then the relationships won't break down in the same way.
So what sort of skills do you
Well, one of the things, I didn't write the code, it was Luke Spicer, who was the first night shelter coordinator. And he wrote 12 sort of, not lessons, but like phrases. And one of them is, we speak with bricks, not stones. And so that's the most powerful one for me, in that the words we use are to encourage and to build up, not to knock down.
Okay.
And another one is, we are bridge builders, not bridge burners, and we seek to build relationships that last. And when people come into the shelter, they say, I'm not going to speak to anyone, I don't want to know anyone, I've had enough, and that's the best way. I'm not going to get into trouble if I don't talk to anyone. And we say it's like a family. Yeah. And in the shelter, people come in not knowing anyone, feeling very ashamed,
But
sometimes.
psychologically, if you've gone through trauma where
Yeah.
somebody's let you down, I'd imagine it's difficult to trust again, isn't
Yeah, and they absolutely vow that they're not going to talk to anyone. It's really hard not to talk to anyone when there's really smiling volunteers.
Yeah.
When the other guests in the shelter are welcoming them, saying, "Do you want a game of pool?
Yeah.
Do you want a cup of tea?
Yeah.
Let's play some
We're
cards."
social animals, right?
Yeah.
We can't resist
Yeah.
it.
Yeah. And for the first time, they'll be with people who understand. So not all the volunteers have been through homelessness, but they understand what life brings. And they're not there to judge you, and they're there to make you feel that you can rest and relax after a hard day of trying to sort out the frustrations of trying to sort out your situation. The other guests certainly can understand all the different things that might have happened, and the fear. Sometimes people are frightened of moving on to the next stage. They really, really like the shelter.
Yeah.
And because there's no...
'Cause it's community, isn't it?
It's community. They've never felt so happy in that community, and we encourage people to stay connected. Certainly the people in our Thrive accommodation, they come back and volunteer. They're in clusters of houses, and so that they can communicate.
Yeah.
And they understand each other. Instead of putting 6 different people into an HMO who have no connection, they are part of the Hope for Havering family, with the Hope for Havering ethos and
values and
everything that we're about.
So, Kim, I'm going to give you a magic wand, right? You've got this magic wand, and you can change one thing, but just one, about how homelessness is perceived, or the situation of homelessness in the UK. You can change anything, but it's got to be really super specific. What would you choose?
I would choose to educate children on the importance of relationship.
Okay.
And because at the end of the day, if they know how to communicate with each other and really understand what family is about and what friendship's about, and that this is the ultimate goal, that will bring satisfaction in their lives, and that the educators understand this and the parents understand this, then our society would be a lot different.
Okay, it's interesting. It wasn't what I was expecting,
No.
actually, but it was more of a sort of tackle the root cause of some of these challenges that have come up. Okay, cool. And tell me about what the future holds for Hope for Havering.
Well, we've been running for 4 or 5 years, a transformation program where people with addictions, we take 6 men at a time, and we have a house in Upminster where we run a program for 18 months. And I'd really like to see that we are there for a long time, and that people know that if they've got partners or children who are struggling with addiction, that there's help out there for them, and that it's going to be there for a long time. So our main goal is to buy that property, and to be there for a long time, so that people know where we are. And it's heartbreaking when you speak to mothers or fathers who say they don't know what to do anymore. They don't want to make their son or daughter, in this case it will be a son, homeless, but they can't cope, and because their life's gone out of control. There's a big problem with cocaine in Havering, and there's a lot of successful people, or apparently successful people, a lot of the building trade, there's cocaine, and whereas in the past we would only get referrals with alcohol and heroin, cocaine is the biggest problem.
And the addiction core.
And I really want it to be known that there's help there, that mothers can have their sons back, children can have their fathers back, that there really is hope. And
do you think it's an interesting one? Because a lot of the conversation, a lot of the interviews I've got coming up about mental health, and particularly men's mental health, funny enough. Got a guy coming on called Nick Elston, who was a super successful guy, really good, and then suffered from a really bad anxiety attack, and then just couldn't sort of impacted his life in a huge way. And part of his story is he just needs to admit that he's got a problem for years that he didn't. And I think we need to change that perception as well, right? That mental health is a taboo subject, because it should be spoken about. It's the only way you're going to sort of cope with that issue. It's an interesting one.
It's that communication thing again.
Goes back to it, doesn't it?
Yeah.
You know, I think when you speak about anything, the perception sometimes in your own head is that people won't understand, but 9 times out of 10, and maybe this is me wearing. Again, I've got a tendency of wearing rose-tinted glasses throughout my life. I think most people are generally amazing. So even with all the challenges, I think people are generous and understand. But that might just be me.
Well, I'm similar in that, because every person who presents to us who's homeless, I see them as a future volunteer, someone who can contribute, someone with value and talents and treasure in their heart.
But basically, we all want to be valued, don't we? We all want to be loved, we all want to be valued, and we all want to contribute and give something back. And that's not about money, that's about just self-worth and having that drive to do it. But amazing. Thank you for that. Tell me one story that encapsulates the work you do best.
Okay, I'll tell the story of Dave, and he won't mind me telling his story, because he often comes with me to tell his own story. But he had a marriage breakup.
Okay.
And was sleeping in Romford under the underpass, and had lived an ordinary life. And I think the breakup made him a little unwell, mentally unwell, and wasn't, certainly at that point, wasn't able to access the help, or what help he'd tried to access, he'd been refused. And he didn't know what to do, and being outside was kind of difficult. And so he'd been there for months upon months, and I went with the local council to do a street count one very cold November night, and met him at 2 a.m. in his sleeping bag. And it was that kind of golden night where if he had agreed to come with them, he probably would have been housed and key worked, because it was the night where if you were found, you would be chosen, kind of thing. And he said he didn't want to move, that he was quite happy in his sleeping bag, and it's like everything in you wanted to say, this is your night. That everyone.
That's a real challenge, because you don't know what's going on in his head at that point.
Well, he thinks,
you're thinking, well, I want to help you. He's thinking, every experience I've had in the past might be a negative one.
He didn't want to get up in the middle of the night to find that he didn't believe the system anymore. And anyway, the police were part of this night as well, and I think the next day they said to him, you really do have to go to the council and sort this out. And he went to the council, and although he wasn't eligible for housing, they referred him to Hope for Havering. And he came, and basically he didn't know that our service existed, that he could have been tucked up in a warm bed for months and months. And
had he been on the street?
At least 4 months. And just feeling more and more hopeless. It didn't take long for us to offer him our own accommodation in one of our Thrive community houses. And he grasped it with open hands and lived in one of those properties, shared houses, and as time went on became kind of like the father to a number of people, because we're quite keen to mix the age groups so that it doesn't become all older people or all young people. And
does that go back to that family dynamic?
Yeah, and also because the younger people keep the older people alive, and the older people steady the younger people.
You know what? It's funny you should say that. I'm going to go off on a bit of a tangent. Charlotte and I have spoken about it on the podcast a couple of times. There was an amazing show on last year, and I'm not a big TV watcher, but it shows that I really, really enjoy it. And it was called Old People's Home for 4-year-olds. Did you watch it? And it was about effectively having a nursery and an old people's home in the same place.
Oh wow.
And it was amazing because the 4-year-olds learned loads from the older people, but these older people really benefited from being surrounded by kids with like all their excitement and aspiration and love of life, and it was weird because there were some really great friendships that developed between the kids and the older people. The most interesting thing was they did some health checks at the start of the show, and then after the 8 weeks, did some health checks after, and the elderly people were actually fitter and healthier after this experience, not only mentally but physically. Amazing, absolutely loved it. So that dynamic is an interesting one.
Yeah, very much so. He's gone on to live in his own studio flat, and he's been our driver for years, and just
Big volunteers now.
Yeah, well, and he's driven and had the other younger guys as his workmates.
Amazing.
And everyone knows Dave.
Yeah, gotcha.
Such a good representative of our charity.
Amazing, love it. So, thank you for that. That's I always say this to our guests, but part of the reason I love doing these interviews is because I always come out of them smiling a bit more. You've made me happy today, Kim, but just by sharing some stories of hope. So I really appreciate that. However, one thing we do like to do on the podcast, and you've heard the nonsensical ramblings of Charlotte and I now. You know that every week we ask a random question of our audience.
Okay.
So I've got a few of our previous ones, and I'm just curious about what your answers would be. So, if you could be any character from one of your favourite books, who would you choose?
Oh. Wow. I really don't know. For some reason, Miss Faversham keeps coming into my mind because but she was so mean. So maybe that's an alter ego.
Maybe it's like just to experience that mindset. I don't know. Maybe that's the case.
That was coming. Or these very extreme women, or Scarlett O'Hara or something.
You just make them live vicariously for a while into that environment. What's the most inspiring movie you've ever seen?
Pay It Forward.
I knew you were going to say.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I cried so much at that film.
And that is a genuinely favourite of our podcast there, so you're not alone on that. What's the world's best biscuit?
It has to be Garibaldi.
See, I'm not a Garibaldi fan.
Yeah,
give me a shortbread any day of the week. But
I'll definitely eat shortbread as well.
And what's your favourite Muppet?
I wasn't a fan of the Muppets, so I'm sorry I can't answer that.
Okay, fair enough. Let me give you a few more. This is an interesting one for you. If you could borrow one skill from one of your parents, what would you choose?
My mum was a great poet, poem writer.
Okay.
Yeah.
So the ability to write poetry.
Yeah.
And another family related one, what's your favourite childhood memory?
Going to the flower market, or the market in London, I can't remember what it's called, with my dad.
Okay. Let me think. What's been your favourite ever Christmas present?
It would be something that the children have made.
Okay.
But I can't think specifically what it would be because they've given me so many.
Best double act ever?
The word Morecambe and Wise come to mind.
Okay, that's a really good choice. And this is the last one, I promise.
Okay,
This was last week's one. What do you get nostalgic about?
The smell of flowers.
Any flower in particular?
Roses.
Okay. And my last question, the question we ask every podcast guest, where can people find out a little bit more about Hope for Havering?
Okay.
We don't ask that about every podcast guest, we ask it about
Okay. hopeforhavering.org is our website, and we're on Facebook and Instagram.
Amazing. Thank you, Kim. I really enjoyed it.
Thank you very much for having me.
No worries. So that was Kim. What did you think, Kim?
She was nice.
She is a bit brilliant and does amazing work in our local community. Thanks, Kim.
Thanks, Kim.
Should we get on with the show?
Let's go.
Tis the... What was that finish? Just a gentle sob at the end. Oh, the end. And
the last vowel syllable thingy got caught in my throat.
And on last week's podcast, because it was Halloween, we did a Halloween-related question. Creepy. We did a Halloween-related question of the podcast, and that was, what's your favourite scary movie? Now, I thought this was going to be more popular than it was, to be honest, because we only had a handful of results, and typically we get
Is that fun?
depends on how big your hand is. Typically,
Whenever I think of handful, I just count my fingers. And it's weird.
So we only effectively got a few results. Now I can't find the results. But what's your favourite scary movie?
The Hole.
The Hole, and that's a kid's scary movie, isn't it?
I don't mean it's any less scary. God.
What's so scary about it?
But it's less. Oh my God, it's just terrifying. It just terrifies me that this little boy is being followed around by this tiny doll, and then it drags him underwater like he's gonna drown, and then this girl is being chased by some friend of hers she let die on a roller coaster.
Nice.
And then it turns out that the oldest boy's fear, the only fear, is his dad's.
Yeah.
And it was like, whoa.
So, these are the answers, right? John Cookie Cook, friend of the show, said it's joint between either the Witchfinder General or the original Halloween. Tamsin Kane said The Omen. Roberta White said Entity. Al McCann, who is now a friend of the show because he's been banging in so many answers. He said, right now, BBC Parliament scares the bejesus out of me. Good answer. Very good answer. We like that. Mandy Medlock said the satire. You know what I'm loving at the minute? Sophie, just every time somebody's sarcastic, she'll just stand and go, sarcasm. All right, you haven't got to point it out. The whole idea of sarcasm is that it's implied, not explicit, but
She's learning.
she's only 7.
She's
bless her.
learning to pick out sarcasm.
Yeah. She's like a sarcasm machine. Sarcasm alarm. Mandy Medlock said the original Friday the 13th, and Russell Dames, our esteemed editor, said Hostel. And that, my friends, is the end of another podcast.
Oh.